Hi, I'm Arthur, and I've been doing a lot of reading recently. You'll notice I'm going to be talking about a lot of different topics in the coming weeks, as this is going to be the rollout of all the new content I've been scripting behind the scenes. See, I tend to read books in batches so that I can get a better idea of what I'm going to do in the future, and I just finished a whole mess of just random wacky nonsense about a bunch of random wacky stuff. So I hope you all enjoy, and this is going to be the start of it. And today is such a fun topic. I've been sitting on this one for about a week or two now. I might even end up talking about the adjacent aspects of the book that this comes from, but in Morvenval, the Spear of Faith, there is a threat so dire that it almost led to the destruction of the homeworld of the Sisters of Battle, Ophelia 7, and the ascension of a Khorne champion so dangerous that if they were to ascend to something greater than they were now, it would basically eclipse the unknown lineage of Decimus and even rival something like an Abaddon or a Huron. The person we are going to be talking about today is Kul Rakul, the Death of Saints. Before we do, I have something really cool to actually show off to all of you. Fun fact, did you guys know that I was in university for 4 years for vertebrate paleontology? Yeah, one of my secret talents is actually having a basic functioning knowledge of taxonomy and cladistics. So when one of you guys reached out to me to promote this Kickstarter for Dragonatomy, I had to say yes, mostly just because it's something I'm going to likely buy myself. Dragonatomy features over 150 beautiful illustrations of what else but dragons. And might I also add, they try to add that scientific flair as they show the various different scientific facts about these dragons, down to the musculature and skeletal structures of their bodies. So it appeals to the sciencey part of my brain as well as the toddler that loves giant fire-breathing lizards. Flicking through it, you'll see beautifully creative ideas that would make you feel like a kid again, discovering unique fantasy concepts, and maybe even see dragons in a new light. Oh, and also it comes with a guide for 5e compatible stat blocks so that you can move some of these dragons over to your games and not have to do much fussing about just to get it to work, which of course I'm going to use because I've been running D&D almost weekly for the past 5 years of my life. So this is going to add a little bit more flair to what I want to do. So if this is something that you're interested in, check out the Kickstarter and consider supporting them, as by my count, when this goes up, they shouldn't have many days left. And if you want any of these goodies, especially with any of the Kickstarter backer rewards, then you're going to want to get them as soon as possible. So click the link in the description or the pinned comment and then go support their Kickstarter. Thanks again to Dragonatomy for sponsoring this video. So to start this video off proper, you probably have this question on your mind. If this man is so important, why haven't we heard of him? It's because the book literally just came out, and it was done by an author who had only done like one other book for Warhammer 40k, Jude Reed. She's a fantastic addition to the Black Library. I've enjoyed her books so far. Also, it's a Sister of Battle book because not a lot of people read those, but like, you should totally go and read it anyway. But regardless, Kul Rakul is such a violent and interesting character, as he is one of the few Chaos characters that we get to know what he was like as a child all the way up to his death and know his motivations, and they are pretty understandable, albeit not reasonable, but yeah, they're complicated and crazy. Okay, who would have thought a Night Lord would be unhinged? That's absolutely impossible, right? But what you need to know is that Kul Rakul had suffered from a young age from murderous urges that would overcome him in time, as well as being born with whipcord muscles and a keen set of senses, but he was also actually a fraternal twin to a lady by the name of Athanasia. I hope I'm saying that right. It may sound like it's all disjointed right now, but trust me, this is gonna go somewhere. Kul Rakul had this voice overcoming his thoughts every now and then. There was this command that would constantly be issued in his mind to kill, kill, kill. Anything that he remotely disagreed with, he would be urged to murder it as quickly as possible. But with the presence of his sister, Athanasia, he was able to fight that back. See, both of them, their parents abandoned them at a young age. They ended up at an orphanage that was on some backwater planet in the middle of bumblefucking nowhere. They would live there day in and day out and be beaten, whipped, and so on by the various heads that would take care of them. It was a very abusive place, and Kal Rakul would fester in his own hatred, but the thing that kept him tethered to reality and tethered to just not being an absolute monster was the presence of his sister. Now, his sister was the exact opposite. She was kind and patient to a fault, really just wanting everybody to get along and be happy no matter what. So they kind of had this interesting back and forth dichotomy where he would build up in this murderous rage, and eventually she would show up and it would just immediately level off and he'd be fine. So this entire backstory takes a dark turn when this nowhere planet ends up getting invaded by the Night Lords. The Night Lords on a raid were trying to abduct children in order to make them into new Night Lords and so on. So the members of the orphanage ended up taking the children and hiding them in a bunker that was located underneath, because in 40k, even your orphanages need bunkers for some reason. So they stayed there for days at a time. Kal Rakul being confined with a bunch of people nearby made him twitchy, made him uneasy, and that murderous voice at the back of his head was telling him to kill anybody who lashed out at him and then make a break for it with his sister and try their best to survive on their own rather than waiting and dying in the basement of some dingy orphanage. When the doors to this bunker opened up, revealing that Sisters of Battle from the Order of the Argent Shroud were there, allegedly to ferry a lot of everybody that was there to safety. And when I say a lot of everybody, they were taking all the female children and women that were below the age of 25 with them, and they told all the guys and older women, hey, we're gonna come back later, don't worry about it, we're not gonna just abandon you here, right? Which in the immortal words of Tyler the Creator,
so that was a fucking lie.
Yeah, they were taking all the girls to convert them into soldiers to help with the war for, the planet. But Kal Rakul knew about this. He could intuit it because he wasn't actually the idiot that they thought he was. So as they were dragging his sister Athanasia away, he pulled a knife out and attacked one of the sisters, carving a big chunk into her hand and having him get beaten into unconsciousness by power armor-clad Sisters of Battle, waking up only hours later to find out that the bunker had mostly been abandoned, slaughtered, or just left, and also that there was a big guy in front of him, and it was a Night Lord who saw that Kal Rakul was not actually afraid of him, which is kind of ominous considering it's a Night Lord. Kal Rakul had been devastated because before he fell unconscious, he saw that the look in his sister's eyes towards him was one of revulsion and fear, and it basically just broke his entire spirit because that was the only reason he had to live. But now that he was discovered by a Night Lord, he had a new reason, as Kal Rakul was recruited into the Night Lords and swiftly became an up-and-coming and very well-known champion. His hate, anger, and rage began to fester as it's a Khorne warband, especially towards the Sisters of Battle of the Argent Shroud and just Sisters of Battle in general. Kal's hatred was focused. He wasn't just a berserking monster like the others that were recruited off of that planet that day, and he swore an oath to retrieve his sister and kill every single person who was responsible for them being separated. Now, you might be asking, what happened to his sister? She did very well and became one of the most prominent living saints of the Argent Shroud's history. So powerful that she could deal wounds to people with her righteous sword that would actually never heal and sunder entire ranks of enemy armies. In her duties, she realized the monster that her brother had become, the brother to a saint, and the sister to a sinner type beat. She was sent to go kill Kal Rakul, and Kal Rakul, for his part, tried to convince her to come with him, and then they would leave this horrible galaxy behind to live together like they did before. Unfortunately, she realized that he was a Night Lord, which is, that's just like wearing armor made of scaring the hoes. It's not a good look. So she ended up trying to fight him, and this is kind of when you get the first glimpse at how powerful Kal Rakul is and how blessed he is from the dark powers, as in single combat, she was able to wound him by slicing a gouge out of his eye, where that right eye is no longer usable, and the wound never healed for hundreds, if not thousands of years after it was dealt. But Khal Rakul was able to murder his sister, just outright killing her in a very brutal display that demoralized an entire Argent Shroud battle sister platoon. Khal Rakul, he internalized this quite a lot, because now instead of just hating the Argent Shroud, he hates every single sister of battle with a burning passion that made Khorne's eye be directly above him to be like, wow, this guy's got some bite to him. He's got some zazz. But he particularly despises the Argent Shroud, thinking that they turned his sister against him. This is kind of where the bloody path of Khal Rakul began, because he would simply start to gather individuals, taking control of the warband that he was inducted into. Even if he wasn't an Astraman-born Night Lord, he still did it through pure determination and power, before gunning his way through the universe and gaining blessings and favor. Now, this is where Khal Rakul kind of takes a very interesting stance that wouldn't be considered a normal Night Lord thing, as this man was not geared for stealth in the slightest. Hit and run, maybe, but not stealth. He had the winged helmet with the skull imprint on it, with one of the eyes carved out to show that his eye never healed. He has an armor rack on the back of his reactor pack that has several spikes on it dedicated to the most important skulls he finds, usually Sisters of Battle that were pretty difficult to fight. And in one hand, he has a blessed power axe that can cut through the neck of any person as if there were no armor. And in the other hand, he has a Mark III pattern lightning claw that is especially customized with serrated edges. This man is not meant to go in and do the sneaky stabby shit. He is going to just fight you. Yeah, screw proper stealth tactics. You're just getting jumped. I'm sorry. But alongside that, he was given various blessings from Chaos, and a few of the more interesting ones, at least the two most prominent ones, is, see, Khal's favorite target was the Sisters of Battle, and it's said in the legends that no matter what you would do, Khal Rakul would return. It could be a week, could be a month, could be a century, but Khal Rakul, the death of saints, would reappear. So he would show up and he would kill as many Sisters of the Argent Shroud as humanly possible, while also attacking any other sister convent he could. This led to him getting a blessing that was only discovered after several raids, where his preferred target of all the sisters was the living saints. He wanted to sow fear and terror in a way that wasn't just the standard Night Lord's tactic. He wanted to destroy the concept of hope. So in order to do that, he would kill the strongest champions of the Sisters of Battle, which would be the Living Saints. The interesting thing about Living Saints, though, is that on occasion, they do come back. They can be revived by divine intervention or what have you. See, our vision has kind of been clouded by the existence of Saint Celestine, who comes back just willy-nilly, randomly, out of goddamn nowhere. But a lot of saints can come back some of the time. But the thing with Khal Rakul is whenever he kills a saint, they don't ever come back. And that's why he gained the nickname the Death of Saints, because he would target saints as well as they would never come back. And also he would claim their skulls as much as possible in order to decorate his armor rack. Due to these boons that he got from the Chaos Gods, he was given the greatest boon of all. Khal Rakul has an exalted mega demon Helldrake, one that is apparently like close to 50% larger than a regular Helldrake, and it has two heads that both breathe hellfire. It's 100% under Khal Rakul's control, almost psychically. Like if Khal is in danger, the Drake just appears to aid him in combat. It's basically a deterrent to keep the weaker members of his legion, you know, the cowardly sorts that will wait for him to sleep to murder him and then take control of his legion. He just threatens dragon murder and boom, them shits just fall in line pretty quickly. Though don't get it twisted, this isn't a Night Lord like any other Night Lord. Khal Rakul is one of the most dangerous melee combatants in the entire legion. I mentioned before, he doesn't mess around with stealth, and that's kind of true, though for some reason he's usually pretty good at the hit and run. And this is displayed several times throughout the book that he's in, where in the same day, he is backstabbed twice by a guy, Ostrov Skulltaker. See, Ostrov thought that Rakul's dedication to the dark powers wasn't as, dedicated as it should be, so he challenged him in single combat. And in turn, Ostrov Skulltaker got turned into a nugget. With very little effort, actually. Ostrov lost an arm and a leg. As Khal Rakul was about to strangle him to death, Ostrov looked up to the sky and pleaded to the dark gods for power to supersede Rakul, which, for some reason, the dark gods were like, I bet, let's see where this goes. So Ostrov's muscles began to swell and bulge as horns began to sprout from his head, but Khal Rakul just responded by going, this is not going to do you any favors, as he cut off the remaining limbs that Ostrov had and left him paralyzed, to which Ostrov was like, well, at least I'm going to be a skull on his armor rack. That at least appeases the dark gods, to which Khal Rakul looked at a tech marine and went, hey, could you put this guy in a Hellbrute sarcophagus? Just to piss him off, because in Khal Rakul's words, his skull wasn't worth putting on his armor rack because he's just a traitor. Man has a mean streak in him, the likes of which you could never imagine. Worse than probably most Night Lords. So, with his backstory out of the way, let's actually get into the meat of his story, since you know a little bit about his character. Like, what's his motivation and what's the main purpose to his entire life? A little late with this, but, hey, you should take the subscribe button out back and execute it by firing squad, preferably with bolters if you have those available. It would really help. I know we just hit 100k, but I kind of want to push it as far as I possibly can. I want to kill it in 2025 and go even further beyond that, so it would mean a lot. Also, let me know what you think about having some longer form videos in the queue. I have a plan going forward, but I want to get your input on that as an idea before doing anything else. Regardless, back to it. Khal Rakul's one goal in life is the same goal he's always had since he was a child, which was simply to be reunited with his sister and live out life the way he was before. Happy, alone with her, and doing whatever he wanted, which unfortunately now has been twisted quite a lot and is literally just killing as many sisters of battle as humanly possible. And also, unfortunately for him, he killed his sister and couldn't keep the body because these sisters escorted the corpse of Saint Athanasio away. They then stripped the body of its meat, bleached the skull, and preserved it with special techno hoo-ha, coated it in a bunch of decorations like silver filigree, and thus they display it as a holy artifact, which the Death of Saints for a very long time has been trying his best to get it. See, it's one of the reasons why he has the armor rack on his back where he's going to display his sister's skull so that they'll never be apart again. And thus, the most important part of his life was when he said fuck it to subtlety and decided to raid Ophelia 7 and claim the skull back once and for all. He committed his entire force of Night Lords to the planet, razing ancient and beautiful monuments to the ground. Now, the part about this that is the most devastating is that, well, Ophelia 7 had just finished up a war against a different chaos uprising. Just after the opening of the Cicatrix Maledictum, a massive Lord of Change known as the Tyrant of Blue Flames, which is a badass name, was causing an untold amount of havoc, and only recently in lore was able to be banished back to the warp and the planet cleansed of most chaos taint. The Death of Saints struck relatively close to when this had occurred, within months of them starting to rebuild and recover. See, the interesting part about the Death of Saints is he always has incredibly good timing and is incredibly lucky, almost to appear as if he's been blessed. And I like to imagine that it's one of his chaos gifts that he, for some reason, is very fortuitous in whatever adventure he goes on. A lot of his gifts in general are a lot more subtle than just tentacles and bulging muscles, as it feels like the insanity that he has as a kid has been laser focused to do more, to be more than what it was. So now it's focused on just being as malicious and evil as humanly possible, and he just doesn't ignore it anymore. It's ticking away at his sanity, and even though he is, 100% batshit insane like most Night Lords, there is a certain cunning to him that is very unique to how most Night Lords plan things out. He rallied the abandoned Chaos slaves on the planet, the cultists and the children of cultists that had been left from the Tyrant of Blue Flame's wake. A lot of these people were not even involved in the Chaos Uprising, but due to their proximity to the Chaos cultists that were there, they were put into indentured servitude for the rest of their life, and being dissatisfied with the way things were, and the Death of Saints, being an incredibly charismatic individual, was able to instill hope and desire to serve in most of them, which is one one of the most important talents in a leader. So he is a god tier fighter, and I mean top tier. He was able to fight a saint similar to that of Celestine, albeit, weaker, obviously. Winged, though, and did it one-on-one. She swung a massive blessed sword that was about to cleave his head, and his response was to catch it and then rip her arm off with his non-lightning claw hand. He is a brilliant strategist, being able to plan assaults and pick apart the minds of those he is fighting against, causing gaps in their armor to be exposed, which he would exploit without a moment's hesitation. Like, this guy, even in direct combat with Black Templars and Sisters of Battle, as well as a bunch of zealot convents, was able to just play into their weaknesses while maintaining a cool head, relying on their overextension in order to get him into a good position to strike before brutally disassembling them, pulling apart every single aspect of their army like a spider being torn apart by ants. There are certain strategic passages in the book where he put key threats at certain points of the battlefield that would need to be dealt with, so the strongest members of each faction would show up, but there were too many, so he would divide them, and one at a time he would rip them to pieces, killing several marshals that were in charge of the Black Templars, as well as their sword brethren that took over for them. Another good example of his tactical acumen is the Convent Sanctorum, the main location that the Sisters of Battle were to stay. This place that was a holy refuge for all sisters was basically protected almost completely by void shields. And what did the Death of Saints do? The most Night Lord shit you could ever imagine, where he got a bunch of the less obedient slaves and had them be whipped and tortured directly near key points where he knew that civilians would be outside of the void shields. These tortured screams and cries were there not to do anything magical or anything. It was just to destroy morale and hope that there were family members on the inside who wanted to hear the suffering of their loved ones stop at any cause. And he would just say, it ends the second the void shields go down, just saying. So charismatic, incredibly intelligent, brilliant strategist, and in direct combat, one of the strongest Night Lords I've ever seen, one of the strongest Chaos Lords in the setting, I would wager, able to fight Black Templar Marshals and Sisters of Battle in Paragon war suits, which are essentially the Sister of Battle equivalent of a massive suit of Terminator armor, but even more armored with better weapons. And he was able to fight them one-on-one and win quite easily. He rallied forces to his whim, he was a great fighter, and was granted so many boons from Chaos, including magical weapons, the ability to kill saints with ease, massive mega Helldrake. So why is he dead, and why did he fail? Because he didn't count on Morven fucking Val showing up. For those who don't know, Morven Val is the Abbess Sanctorum of the High Lords of Terra. She's in fact the High Lord of Terra who is responsible for every single Sister of Battle in existence. And because of that, she is one of the most insanely trained combatants that has ever existed in the Sisters of Battle, being equipped with some of the greatest equipment possible. She's the second best combatant on the entirety of the High Lords of Terra team, only being seconded by Trajan Valoris, which isn't really saying much because Trajan Valoris is the greatest fighter in the Imperium, technically second and thirded only by the Lion and Gilliman himself. Trajan is a beast, and even he gives his praise to Morven Val for being one of the bravest warriors the Imperium has to offer. See, Morven was a part of the Argent Shroud, and she knew the legend of the Death of Saints because it was part of her lineage that knew it the best. And thus, she flew to Ophelia 7, even after the High Lords of Terra basically told her that if she did, there would be repercussions and she would probably no longer be a High Lord of any kind. She did not listen to this because she believed that Ophelia 7 was a sacred place that needed to be protected at all costs, and thus she equipped herself with her Relic Paragon warsuit, the Purgator Mirabilis, brought a squad of her top Celestians, and nothing else but piss and vinegar pumping through her veins. She showed up and destabilized the whole conflict, but you think think it would be cut and dry. Nah, the fights between Morven Val and Col Rakul, both on a charisma level, an intellectual level, a strategic level, as well as a physical level, basically play out the entire book. It is not an even fight, as in the majority of these fights, in the majority of these conflicts, Morven Val comes up wanting. Col Rakul is a better strategist than her. Col Rakul is smarter than her. He's more charismatic than her, as throughout the entirety of the book, Morven Val is actually pushing people away from her with her brash and idiotic decision-making. Col Rakul is physically stronger than Morven Val, to the point it's not even fair to compare them. Like, even in the Purgator warsuit, she could barely fight him one-on-one. But why then did Col Rakul lose to Morven Val at the end of the book? And it's because of one key mistake he made. One thing that he forgot, one crucial thing about Sisters of Battle. And you need to remember this if ever you're going against the Sisters of Battle, because if you forget it, you'll end up like Col Rakul, the Death of Saints. And that is the simple fact that every Sister of Battle in existence is fucking crazy. During the final battle, Morven Val, her warsuit, this ancient made of adamantine and ceramite, the Purgator Mirabilis, was basically destroyed. The hydraulic fluid in both legs was leaking, she couldn't stand anymore. The gun arm on her side was destroyed, and her weapon, this massive relic power lance, was nowhere to be found. Sure, Col Rakul had been damaged pretty severely by this conflict in direct fighting, but he was standing and still pretty powerful, even by comparison to anyone. So he, in a moment of arrogance, thought that he won and that there was nothing else that she could do. So he walked up to her to gloat just a little bit before he was going to rip her head off from her still alive body. And in that moment, that's when he fucked up, because Morven Val, with her one functioning Purgator suit arm, grabbed onto Col Rakul's armor and fired every single missile left in the Purgator's missile racks point blank, trying to kill both of them if it meant that Col Rakul would die. Which, to be fair, neither of them died. Morven was basically like, her bones were more a sack of dust and jelly than they were actual bones. Her ribs were described as being shattered in a dozen places. Both of her legs had major fractures, and her arms were basically dislocated from every joint possible, and a few new joints were made from the explosion. Though because Col Rakul was on the receiving end, and the Purgator had a force field that was still barely functioning, Col Rakul he was missing both his legs and one of his arms. His other eye was no longer functioning, and he was completely blind, but he was still alive, staring up at the sky, asking for forgiveness from his sister for all the crimes that he had committed. And this is where the interesting thing about Col Rakul happens. See, there was a thing I mentioned earlier. There was this lady, this woman who was the descendant of a chaos slave that was a part of the Tyrant of Blue Flames regime. Now, this lady grew up with her father being a cultist leader, but she never knew anything about the cult, and thus was picked up by the Sisters of Battle and forced into indentured servitude. Lethe, I believe her name was, and Col Rakul saved this girl, gave her his mark under her eye, and then basically made her his herald of slaughter, seeing in her at least a glimmer of what made his sister what his sister was to him. So Lethe showed up, and in a stroke of malice, seeing the broken lord that had raised her, used the knife that he gave her and stabbed him through the throat, which is very interesting, because you find out later in the book, and this is something that I want to talk about, that this woman might actually become the first Dark Saint of Chaos, as I will discuss later, maybe in a different video, but it is interesting to note that she made it away pretty scot-free and is doing a lot of things that a living saint would do, but for chaos. Morven basically survived by the skin of her teeth, with a lot of permanent damage and scarring that basically is pocking her entire body, and it's going to take her years to recover. But yeah, with her actions, using one last gambit to kill the Death of Saints, the Night Lords fell apart. The Warband itself decided to eat itself, because that's just what Night Lords do. They can't handle not having strong leadership, so everybody was vying to be the new leader, as Night Lords tend to do. But yeah, thus ends the Death of Saints. A Chaos Warlord so horrible that the only thing keeping him in check was the fact that he only really wanted to kill Sisters of Battle to get his sister's skull back. And after he got his sister's skull back, fun fact, he immediately openly stated that after we're done burning Ophelia 7 to the ground, we then gun it for Terra, which is a really funny thing to think about, as a Night Lord, in theory, could possibly be a threat to the Imperium on the level of like Huron Blackheart and maybe Abaddon the Despoiler waging a crusade against the holy ground of Terra. But we may not ever know. The only thing that foiled him was Morven Val. But, as we found out earlier, the death of saints always comes back, somehow. Will he? I don't know. Probably not. I mean, Kurz is one of those individuals who says he will return somehow, but maybe he was just doing that to mess with people, because he does do that. So what did you all think about the death of saints? It's been a while since we got any cool Night Lords characters, so I wanted to put the newest one out there and see what you felt. There is not much information out there about him, as the book is incredibly new, so the wiki page has a single paragraph blur about him, but yeah, let me know how you felt about him. You know the routine. Scream about it in the comments, and I'll keep an eye on it, because again, you know, I'm passionate about Night Lords and all that. Special thanks to my channel members for supporting me, and if you want to support me, as well as gain access to additional or early content, then become a channel member today. Thanks once again for watching, and before I go, I just want to say, if I had a nickel for every story I read focusing on a Night Lords leader figure that had overtones of slave master pet play, I would have 2 nickels, which isn't a lot. But it's weird that that happened twice.